A renowned and wealthy artist in Norway, Henrik Lund, becomes captivated by the gallery's new secretary, Ellen Svensson, who was abandoned by her fiancé at the altar. What Henrik never expected was, how far can the past change the course of a great love and redefine an entire life? Before we continue, tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching the video from. And don't forget to subscribe. In the heart of Oslo, the air was thick with anticipation as Henrik Lund stood before a massive canvas, the vibrant colors of his latest work swirling in a chaotic dance that mirrored the tumultuous thoughts racing through his mind. The gallery, with its high ceilings and stark white walls, was both a sanctuary and a prison. It held the fruits of his labor, his passion, and his struggles, yet it also bore the weight of expectations that seemed to grow heavier with each passing day. The upcoming exhibition loomed like a storm cloud, promising both triumph and turmoil. What had once been a source of pride had transformed into a source of anxiety. The pressure of fame was a relentless companion, whispering doubts that clawed at his confidence. Henrik's brush hovered above the canvas, his heart pounding in rhythm with the ticking clock. Each stroke he had added felt inadequate, as if he were trying to capture the essence of something that was forever just out of reach. The vibrant reds and blues bled into one another, forming shapes and forms that only he could decipher. He found himself lost in thought, contemplating the journey that had led him here. The sacrifices, the sleepless nights, the moments of sheer ecstasy and deep despair. Art had always been his refuge, yet it now felt like a double-edged sword, cutting through the fabric of his solitude to expose the raw nerves of his past. Just then, the soft sound of footsteps broke his reverie. Ellen Svensson, his new secretary, entered the gallery, her presence like a breath of fresh air. She carried an aura of resilience that both intrigued and comforted him. There was something in her demeanor, a quiet strength that drew him in. When their eyes met, an undeniable chemistry sparked between them, igniting a connection that felt both thrilling and terrifying. Ellen had recently joined his team, and though their professional relationship was still in its infancy, Henrik sensed a depth in her that went beyond her role as his assistant. As she approached, the light filtered through the large gallery windows, casting a soft glow upon her features. Ellen had a way of moving that was both graceful and purposeful, her every step imbued with a hint of determination. She offered a genuine smile, one that seemed to unfurl the tension knotting Henrik's stomach. In that moment, the chaos of his thoughts faded into the background, replaced by a curious sense of ease. It was a fleeting respite, yet it lingered long enough for him to savor. As they stood together in the vastness of the gallery, the silence between them held a promise of unspoken words. Henrik felt a pang of longing, a desire to bridge the gap between their worlds. Yet, the walls he had built around himself were formidable. He had learned the hard way that vulnerability could lead to heartache, and as an artist, he had always kept his emotions at arm's length. But Ellen's presence challenged that notion, compelling him to confront the possibility of connection. Later that day, as they worked side by side, Ellen paused to gather her thoughts, her gaze drifting toward the floor. It was a moment of vulnerability he had not anticipated, and it stirred something deep within him. She had recently endured a profound heartbreak, the remnants of a shattered engagement weighing heavily on her spirit. The news had traveled through the gallery like wildfire, and Henrik had felt an instinctual urge to protect her, to offer solace amidst the chaos. He watched as she fought to maintain her composure, her fingers fidgeting with the edge of a stack of papers. There was a strength in her struggle, a resilience that captivated him. Despite the pain etched in her features, Ellen was not broken. She was healing, and he admired her for it. It was a stark contrast to his own feelings of inadequacy as he faced the pressures of his impending showcase. As the day turned into night, the atmosphere in the gallery shifted. The once stark walls now seemed to vibrate with the electric energy of their shared experience. Henrik found himself caught in the rhythm of their collaboration, the laughter and camaraderie flowing freely between them. They worked late into the evening, the gallery illuminated by soft, warm lights that enveloped them in a cocoon of creativity. The clinking of paintbrushes and the rustle of canvas became the soundtrack of their connection, each shared moment weaving a tapestry of understanding between them. In the quiet of the gallery, surrounded by the fruits of his labor, Henrik felt a sense of liberation. Ellen's laughter echoed like music, a refreshing sound that broke through the silence of his solitary existence. He began to share stories of his artistic journey, the highs and lows that had shaped him into the man he was today. With each revelation, he peeled back the layers of his guarded heart, revealing vulnerabilities he had long buried beneath the weight of expectations. Ellen listened intently, her eyes sparkling with empathy and understanding. For the first time in a long while, Henrik felt seen, not just as an artist but as a man grappling with his emotions. The connection between them deepened, an unspoken bond forming in the quiet moments shared under the soft glow of gallery lights. Yet, with each laugh and shared secret, a flicker of hesitation ignited within him. He was acutely aware of the complications that could arise from pursuing a romantic connection with her. His fame was a double-edged sword, and the shadows of his past loomed large, threatening to eclipse the budding intimacy they were cultivating. As the night wore on, Henrik grappled with the conflicting emotions swirling within him. He admired Ellen's resilience, her ability to confront her pain head-on, yet he feared the implications of forging a romantic relationship. The weight of his celebrity status pressed down on him, a constant reminder of the scrutiny that came with it. Would he be able to protect her from the relentless gaze of the public? Could he bear the thought of dragging her into the turmoil that often accompanied his life? Despite the uncertainty, there was a magnetic pull drawing him closer to her, a yearning that transcended the barriers he had erected. The warmth of her laughter, the kindness in her gaze, it all beckoned him into uncharted territory, a place where vulnerability could flourish. As he stole glances at her, Henrik felt a growing sense of hope, a flicker of possibility that perhaps this woman could be the one to break through the defenses he had so carefully constructed. But as the night deepened, a cloud of apprehension settled over him. He had been hurt before, and the scars of his past lingered, whispering warnings of caution. The thought of exposing himself, of risking heartache once more, filled him with trepidation. Yet, beneath the weight of his fears, a voice within him urged him to embrace the moment, to allow himself to feel. In the dim light of the gallery, amidst the vibrant colors of his art and the gentle laughter shared between them, Henrik stood at a crossroads. The canvas before him was more than just a work of art. It was a reflection of his journey, a testament to the complexities of love, loss, and the longing for connection. And as he glanced once more at Ellen, her eyes meeting his with an understanding that transcended words, he felt the stirrings of hope. Perhaps this was the moment he had been waiting for, the beginning of a new chapter in his life, one filled with the promise of affection and the possibility of healing. Yet, in the depths of his mind, the shadows of his past whispered caution. As the night unfolded, Henrik found himself torn between the longing for connection and the fear of what might come next. The exhibition was fast approaching, and with it, the weight of his past would soon collide with the possibilities of his future. As Ellen Svensson rummaged through a box of Henrik Lund's personal items, her fingers brushed against a layer of dust that had settled over time, as if the memories within were waiting to be unearthed. She had taken it upon herself to organize the gallery's storage room, a task that came with its own sense of intimacy. The box was heavy, filled with old photographs, brushes, and sketches that hinted at the life of the talented artist beyond the canvas. When her eyes fell upon a faded photograph, she felt an inexplicable pull. It was a picture of Henrik, taken years ago, standing on the edge of a cliff, the wind tousling his dark hair, a soft smile gracing his lips. Ellen couldn't help but be enchanted by the image. He looked so youthful, so carefree, as if he were standing at the precipice of his dreams. She held the photograph delicately, absorbing the layers of time that it represented. The edges were worn, a testament to its significance. Yet, the moment felt bittersweet, as she could sense a story lingering behind his smile, one that he had yet to share with her. Curiosity bubbled within her, and she made her way to find Henrik, who was busy preparing for the upcoming exhibition. As she approached, the photograph clutched tightly in her hand. She could see the concentration etched on his face as he meticulously adjusted a piece of art. There was an intensity in his gaze, an artist's fervor that was both captivating and intimidating. She cleared her throat, trying to gather her thoughts, but the weight of the photograph felt heavy, laden with questions that she was unsure how to voice. Henrik looked up, his blue eyes locking onto hers. A flicker of confusion crossed his face as he noticed the photograph in her hand. Ellen hesitated for a moment, searching for the right words, but instead of asking him directly, she chose a gentle approach. She raised the photograph slightly, allowing him a glimpse of the past that had remained hidden. Yet, as she opened her mouth to speak, Henrik's expression shifted, a shadow crossing his features. He turned away, his demeanor suddenly guarded, as if the photograph had opened a door to a room he wasn't ready to enter. Ellen watched as he changed the subject, deftly steering the conversation toward the logistics of the exhibition. She felt a pang of disappointment mingled with the intrigue. It was clear that the past weighed heavily on him, and she was torn between her desire to know more and her respect for his boundaries. As the days passed and the exhibition night approached, Ellen found herself increasingly drawn to Henrik. They shared long hours in the gallery, filled with vibrant discussions about art and life, dreams and aspirations. Each moment spent together deepened her admiration, but it also intensified the longing she felt for a connection that seemed just out of reach. She sensed the tenderness in his gaze, the way his laughter danced in the air. Yet there was always an invisible wall between them, built from the bricks of his past that he seemed reluctant to dismantle. With the exhibition looming, Ellen poured herself into her work, ensuring every detail was perfect. She organized the layout, coordinated the lighting, and reached out to potential attendees. All the while, Henrik was there beside her, his presence a constant reassurance. They worked late into the night, their laughter echoing in the gallery like a symphony of hope and excitement. Amidst the preparations, Ellen found herself sharing her own dreams, her own vulnerabilities. She spoke of her love for art, her childhood aspirations, and the heartbreak that had left her feeling unmoored. In turn, Henrik opened up about his journey as an artist, the struggles he faced in a world that often seemed overwhelming. As they shared their stories, Ellen felt a warmth blossoming between them, a bond strengthened by their respective pasts and the promise of what lay ahead. Yet, as the day of the exhibition approached, Ellen noticed a change in Henrik. He became more pensive, his mind occasionally wandering to places she could not follow. She could sense an undercurrent of anxiety in his demeanor, as if the weight of expectations was beginning to press down on him. But even as he seemed distant, she felt an overwhelming desire to protect him, to shield him from the pressures that fame and success could bring. On the night of the exhibition, the gallery buzzed with energy, a vibrant tapestry of art and humanity. Ellen stood among the crowd, her heart racing with excitement and anticipation. She watched as Henrik moved through the throngs of admirers, his presence magnetic. He captivated the audience with his passion, his words painting vivid pictures of his inspiration and the stories behind each piece. As she observed him, Ellen felt a swell of pride. Here was a man who had poured his soul into his art, who had faced the trials of life with resilience. Yet, in the midst of the applause and admiration, Ellen couldn't shake the feeling that there remained an unfinished chapter in Henrik's life. She caught his eye across the room, and in that fleeting moment, their connection felt electric, as if the world around them faded into a blur. But just as the moment seemed to crystallize, a woman entered the gallery. Her presence was striking, commanding immediate attention. Ellen's heart sank as she recognized the tension that flared in Henrik's expression. The woman approached him with an air of urgency, her intentions cloaked in mystery. Ellen stood rooted in place, her pulse quickening. The crowd continued to swirl around her, laughter and chatter filling the air. But her focus remained on Henrik and the enigmatic woman. She felt a pang of jealousy grip her heart, a sharp reminder of the barriers that still existed between her and the man she had come to care for deeply. Henrik's gaze shifted from the woman to Ellen, and in that moment, she could see the conflict etched on his face. It was a look that spoke of history, of unresolved feelings, and perhaps of choices made long before Ellen had entered his life. As the woman leaned closer, whispering something into his ear, Ellen's heart ached with uncertainty. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her, a reminder that sometimes the past refuses to stay buried. The exhibition, once a celebration of creativity and connection, now felt overshadowed by the arrival of this mysterious figure. Ellen's mind raced with questions, her heart heavy with the knowledge that the night was unfolding in ways she had not anticipated. She longed to step forward, to bridge the distance that had formed, but the sight of Henrik, lost in conversation with the woman, held her back. The joy of the evening seemed to flicker in the face of an unknown storm, leaving her feeling adrift in a sea of emotions. As the crowd continued to admire Henrik's work, a tension simmered in the air. Ellen could only watch, her thoughts a whirlwind of insecurities and fears. She wondered if this woman was a ghost from Henrik's past, a reminder of the life he once lived, or perhaps something more. The gallery, once a sanctuary of creativity, began to feel like a stage where the drama of their lives was unfolding in real time, and Ellen was left grappling with her place in it all. In the midst of the chaos, the electric connection she had felt with Henrik now seemed fragile, threatened by shadows of the past that loomed just out of reach. And as the exhibition continued around her, she realized that the night would mark a turning point, not just for Henrik, but for her as well. A night when secrets would surface, and the bonds they had begun to form would be tested in ways she could never have foreseen. The atmosphere in the gallery shifted as the mysterious woman, Ingrid, entered. She moved with a certain confidence, her presence commanding attention from the crowd that had gathered around Henrik's artwork. Ellen watched from a distance, her heart quickening as she noticed the way Henrik's demeanor changed the moment he laid eyes on Ingrid. It was as if a veil had been pulled over the warmth and brightness of the exhibition, casting shadows on the vibrant colors of the paintings surrounding them. Henrik had been so engrossed in the celebration of his work, the culmination of months of effort and emotional investment, that he hadn't anticipated this disruption. Ingrid approached him with an intensity that made Ellen's stomach churn. The way she leaned in, her voice lowered but urgent, sent a wave of unease coursing through Ellen. She tried to focus on the guests mingling, sipping wine and discussing the art, but her attention kept drifting back to Henrik and Ingrid. Henrik stood tall, his posture rigid as he engaged in conversation with Ingrid. Ellen could see the flicker of confusion in his eyes, the tension in his jaw as he processed whatever it was Ingrid had come to say. There was an intensity in their exchange, a history woven into the fabric of their words that Ellen couldn't quite grasp. As Ingrid continued to speak, her hands animated, Ellen felt an inexplicable pang of jealousy. It was irrational, she knew, but the sight of Henrik captivated by another woman stirred something unsettling within her. Ellen's mind raced, grappling with the rising tide of emotions. She had grown fond of Henrik, more than she had intended. They had shared late nights filled with laughter and dreams, moments that had drawn them together in unexpected ways. But here was Ingrid, seemingly a specter from Henrik's past, threatening to unravel the fragile bond they had begun to weave. Ellen took a deep breath, reminding herself to hold on to her composure. She was merely his assistant, and whatever connection they shared was complicated by the shadows of their respective histories. Ingrid's voice, though muted to Ellen, carried an urgency that made Henrik's expression shift from confusion to shock. Ellen's heart sank as she noted the way Henrik's eyes widened, the way his breath seemed to hitch. Whatever Ingrid had revealed had fundamentally altered the atmosphere between them. Ellen felt a coldness creeping in, a sense of isolation as she stood on the periphery of their conversation, a bystander to a revelation that had the potential to change everything. As the minutes passed, the crowd around the exhibition seemed to fade into the background. Ellen could hear the murmur of voices, the clinking of glasses, but all of it became a distant hum. Her focus narrowed on Henrik, whose expression shifted once more, the lines of his face etched deeper with worry and disbelief. She could see the flickers of emotions playing across his features, anger, confusion, a hint of something that resembled fear. Ingrid continued speaking, her hands moving expressively as she laid out the details of what she had come to share. Ellen felt a knot tightening in her stomach. The longer the two spoke, the more she felt the weight of the world pressing down on Henrik. He was a man known for his passion, his artistry, yet in this moment, He seemed lost, adrift in a sea of emotions he hadn't anticipated. Finally, the moment came when Ingrid's words hung in the air like a heavy cloud, a pregnant pause that seemed to stretch on indefinitely. Ellen's heart raced as she watched Henrik's face transform, the shock giving way to a deeper, more profound realization. It was as if a dam had burst, unleashing a torrent of feelings that he had kept hidden beneath the surface. Ellen could see the struggle within him as he tried to comprehend the enormity of what he had just learned. The revelation that Ingrid had shared, of a son, Emil, sank into Ellen's consciousness like a stone dropped into still water, sending ripples of uncertainty throughout her. She stood frozen, grappling with the implications of this unexpected news. The emotional weight of the moment pressed against her chest, tightening her breath. Henrik, a father? The thought sent her spiraling into a whirlwind of questions. How could he have been unaware? What had happened in the past that had led to this revelation now? Ellen's gaze darted back to Henrik, whose expression had turned thunderous, a storm brewing behind his eyes. He was grappling with the reality of a child he never knew existed, one that was now undeniably a part of his life. As he processed Ingrid's words, the depth of his internal struggle became apparent. The gallery, filled with the light and laughter of the exhibition, seemed to fade away, replaced by the dark shadows of Henrik's past and the uncertain future that loomed ahead. Ingrid's presence felt like a dark cloud over the gallery, casting a pall over the joy that had filled the space just moments before. Ellen could see how deeply this revelation affected Henrik, and her heart ached for him. She had witnessed his vulnerability, the way he opened up to her during their late-night conversations, and now he was thrust into a reality that would force him to confront not only his past, but also the man he hoped to be. The room felt stifling, the air thick with unspoken words and emotions. Ellen's mind raced, trying to piece together the fragments of this new reality. She could see the pain etched on Henrik's face, the conflict brewing within him. He was a man caught between the past and the present, and she yearned to reach out, to comfort him. But the weight of Ingrid's presence held her back. When Ingrid finally stepped back, allowing silence to envelop them once more, Ellen saw the sparks of anger and frustration flash across Henrik's features. He had always been passionate, a man who poured himself into his art and his relationships, but this revelation turned that passion into something raw and tumultuous. Ellen could sense the fight within him, the desire to protect what might still be salvageable in the wreckage of his past. As Ingrid continued to speak, Henrik's expression hardened. He was not merely a victim of circumstance. He was a man who had choices to make. Ellen could see that he was grappling not only with the knowledge of his son's existence, but also with the implications of his past decisions. The weight of those choices bore down on him, and she felt an overwhelming need to support him, to remind him that he was not alone in this. In this moment, Ellen's heart swelled with compassion for Henrik. She had come to care for him deeply, and the thought of his pain struck a chord within her. She knew that while the shadows of his past loomed large, there was still light to be found in the connections they had forged. As she watched the two of them, Ellen resolved to stand by him, whatever the outcome. The moment stretched on, laden with unresolved tension. Ellen felt a sense of helplessness as she stood on the sidelines, an unwilling observer to the unfolding drama. She had always been drawn to Henrik's strength, his passion, but now he seemed vulnerable in a way she had never witnessed. The realization struck her that behind the confident facade of the renowned artist lay a man grappling with the weight of his choices, and she wanted nothing more than to help him navigate this storm. As Ingrid stepped back, the air crackled with anticipation, a silent acknowledgement of the gravity of the situation. Henrik was left standing, a man on the precipice of change, forced to reconcile the past with the present. Ellen could see the flickers of resolve in his eyes, a burgeoning determination to confront the reality of his situation. The moment was poignant, charged with the promise of transformation, but also fraught with uncertainty. Ellen took a step closer, her heart beating rapidly in her chest. She wanted to reach out to Henrik, to offer him solace and support, but the weight of Ingrid's revelation hung heavily in the air. The gallery, once a sanctuary of creativity and joy, had become a battleground of emotions, and Ellen knew that the road ahead would be anything but easy. The night wore on, and the vibrant energy of the exhibition was replaced by an undercurrent of tension. Ellen remained vigilant, her gaze fixed on Henrik as he processed the whirlwind of emotions swirling around him. She understood that this was just the beginning of a journey that would force him to confront his past and reassess the choices he had made. As he stood there, grappling with the enormity of his situation, Ellen felt a flicker of hope. In the midst of the chaos, there was still the possibility of redemption, of healing, and of building a new future. And she was determined to be there for him, no matter how stormy the waters ahead might become. The atmosphere in the gallery felt heavy with unspoken words as Henrik stood alone after Ingrid's abrupt departure. The vibrant colors of his latest canvases, which usually brought him solace, now seemed muted against the storm brewing within him. His heart raced, a chaotic mix of guilt, confusion, and fear coursing through his veins. The revelation of Emil, his son, had shattered the carefully curated life he had built around his art and fame. He had always envisioned himself as a solitary artist, thriving in the depths of his creativity, yet now he was confronted with a reality that demanded his attention and responsibility. Ellen remained in the gallery, her presence a steadying force amidst the turmoil. She had witnessed the exchange between Henrik and Ingrid, and the weight of that moment lingered in the air, thick as fog. As she observed Henrik, she could see the conflict etched into his features. The artist she admired so deeply was now grappling with a profound sense of loss, not just of his past, but the potential of a future he never knew existed. She felt a swell of compassion for him. Her heart ached not just for his turmoil, but for the boy who had been thrown into this complicated web of emotions. Henrik turned to face Ellen, his eyes searching hers for understanding. The vulnerability he had displayed earlier, when he shared snippets of his life with her, felt like a distant memory. Now, he was afraid to reveal the depths of his turmoil for fear of pushing her away. Yet, deep down, he knew he could not carry this burden alone. The significance of his connection with Ellen had grown stronger, and in this moment, he needed her more than ever. For Ellen, the moment felt pivotal. She could sense the walls he had built around himself beginning to crack, revealing the raw and unfiltered emotions beneath. The memory of her own heartbreak flashed through her mind, and she recalled how isolating it had felt. In that instant, she made the decision to bridge the distance between them. She stepped closer, her presence a silent invitation for him to share his pain. Henrik took a deep breath, the air thick with the scent of oil paint and the weight of his past. He began to speak, his voice barely above a whisper. The words tumbled out in a rush, laden with guilt and uncertainty. He spoke of the life he had envisioned for himself, the freedom he had cherished, and the sudden intrusion of this unexpected truth. Each sentence was punctuated by the depth of his regret, and as he spoke, Ellen listened intently, her heart aching for the man before her. In the quiet of the gallery, surrounded by art that had once symbolized his freedom, Henrik laid bare the fears that haunted him. He worried about the kind of father he would be. Would he be able to connect with Emil? Could he provide the stability and love that the boy deserved? The thought of failing as a father terrified him more than the judgment of the art world. He felt as though he had been handed a paintbrush and a canvas, but the image it conjured was blurred and undefined. Ellen watched him, her heart swelling with empathy. She understood the weight of parental responsibility, having felt the void left by her own parents in the wake of her broken engagement. She gently encouraged him to consider the possibility that meeting Emil could be a step toward healing, not just for Henrik, but for the son he had never known. She reminded him of the resilience that had drawn her to him in the first place, urging him to recognize that love often flourished in the most unexpected circumstances. Henrik absorbed her words, the flicker of hope igniting within him, albeit hesitantly. He realized that Ellen was right. Meeting Emil could provide a sense of closure, a chance to redefine his identity not just as an artist but as a father. The notion frightened him, yet beneath that fear lay a burgeoning desire to embrace his son's existence. He could not run from this responsibility, as tempting as it was to retreat into the safety of his art. As they continued to talk, Henrik felt a shift within himself. The turmoil that had once felt insurmountable began to recede, replaced by a burgeoning determination. He looked at Ellen, the light of her unwavering support shining brightly in the dim gallery. Her belief in him felt like a lifeline, and he knew he needed to follow through on this new chapter of his life. The conversation flowed naturally, each word weaving a tapestry of understanding between them, and Henrik felt grateful for her presence. She had become a confidant, grounding him in a reality he had been so desperate to avoid. Her encouragement ignited a flicker of courage within him, and he began to envision what it might be like to meet Emil, to forge a connection with the son he had never acknowledged. As the evening wore on, the gallery grew quieter, the shadows lengthening on the walls adorned with his artwork. Henrik stood before a particularly vibrant piece, the strokes of color reflecting the complexity of his emotions. It was a self-portrait, and for the first time, he saw not just the artist but the man, one who was on the brink of transformation. The canvas seemed to mirror his own journey, a blend of chaos and beauty, of pain and hope. Ellen watched him, sensing the shift in his demeanor. The artist was beginning to reclaim his narrative, to take ownership of his past and the future that lay ahead. She felt a sense of pride for him, knowing that he was preparing to confront the shadows that had loomed over him for so long. The night deepened, and they shared a comfortable silence, both lost in their thoughts. Ellen reflected on her own journey, the heartbreak that had once felt like a heavy anchor, now a catalyst for growth. She had learned that vulnerability could lead to unexpected connections, and she hoped that Henrik would find the same strength in his forthcoming meeting with Emil. As Henrik stood in the gallery, contemplating the steps he would take, a sense of resolution filled the space between them. He had a long road ahead, filled with uncertainty and fear, but with Ellen by his side, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. He would embrace the challenge of fatherhood, ready to face whatever lay ahead. In that moment, amidst the canvases and colors that had long defined his existence, Henrik Lund realized that the true masterpiece of his life was just beginning to unfold. The journey ahead would be complex, filled with the realities of parenthood and the emotional depth of reconnecting with the son he had yet to meet. Yet, he was no longer alone in this endeavor. With Ellen's unwavering support, he felt ready to take that first step into the unknown, to paint a new narrative filled with love, redemption, and the promise of family. Henrik Lund sat in a small cafe not far from his gallery, the scent of fresh coffee mingling with the crisp Oslo air. He had arrived a bit early for the meeting with his son, Emil, and the anticipation weighed heavily on him. The cafe was bathed in the soft light of a late afternoon sun, casting long shadows that danced across the wooden tables. Henrik could see families enjoying their time together, children laughing and playing, and couples sharing intimate moments. Each sound, each joyful expression, felt like a distant echo of the life he had longed for but had not allowed himself to consider. His thoughts drifted back to the moment he had learned about Emil. It had been a whirlwind of emotions, confusion, anger, guilt, and an overwhelming sense of responsibility that threatened to drown him. Now, as the minutes ticked by, he felt a mix of excitement and dread at the thought of meeting the little boy he had unknowingly been missing for so long. He glanced at his phone, the screen illuminating his troubled expression. A message from Ellen flashed briefly before he dismissed it. She had been a steadfast support through all this, her presence a grounding force in his chaotic mind. When the door to the cafe swung open, a brisk gust of wind announced the arrival of Emil. The boy was shy, his small frame dwarfed by the oversized jacket he wore. Henrik's heart ached at the sight. He had imagined this moment countless times, yet nothing could prepare him for the reality of it. Emil stood hesitantly at the entrance, his bright eyes scanning the room as if seeking reassurance that he was in the right place. Henrik felt a surge of warmth, a powerful instinct to protect this child who was a part of him. As Emil made his way to the table, Henrik stood up instinctively. The boy's gaze met his, and in that brief moment, an unspoken connection flickered between them. Emil's curiosity was evident, yet he held back, as if he were waiting for permission to approach. Henrik knelt down to the boy's level, his heart racing. The sight of Emil's tousled hair and the innocence in his expression struck a chord deep within him. Here was the embodiment of everything he had once longed for. a living reminder of choices made and paths not taken. Henrik could see the uncertainty in Emil's eyes, a reflection of his own turmoil. He extended his hand slowly, a gesture of welcome, and to his relief, Emil reached out to take it. The boy's grip was tentative yet firm, and for Henrik, it was as if time had suspended for just a heartbeat. This was his son. The weight of the revelation settled heavily in his chest, mingling with a sense of pride and an overwhelming desire to be a good father. They found a small table by the window, sunlight filtering through the glass and illuminating Emil's face. Henrik tried to engage the boy with gentle questions, observing the way Emil's fingers fidgeted with the edge of his jacket, the way he bit his lip in thought. The shyness that enveloped Emil spoke volumes about the life he had led without Henrik. The boy was curious but cautious, likely carrying the weight of uncertainties that no child should have to bear. Henrik felt a pang of guilt wash over him. He had been absent during all of Emil's formative moments. As they sat there, silence loomed between them like a fragile thread, and Henrik realized how little he knew about his son. He desperately wished he could bridge the gap, to dissolve the barriers that life had built around them. He wanted to share stories, laughter, and perhaps even a few of his own struggles, but the words eluded him. Instead, he focused on Emil, studying the way his small hands moved and the way his eyes sparkled with fleeting moments of intrigue. After a while, Emil took a deep breath, his little shoulders rising and falling as he summoned the courage to speak. He asked about Henrik's art, his voice barely above a whisper. The question surprised Henrik, igniting a flicker of joy within him. He began to talk about his passion, about how each canvas was not just a piece of art, but a piece of himself poured onto the fabric. As he spoke, he saw Emil's eyes widen with interest, the initial shyness slowly dissipating. It was a breakthrough, a glimpse into the connection they could forge. The conversation began to flow, and Henrik felt a warmth spreading through him. The boy was intelligent, insightful, and perceptive in ways that took Henrik by surprise. They spoke about colors and shapes, and Emil even shared his own drawings, which he described with enthusiasm. The more they talked, the more Henrik felt the weight of his fears lighten, as if the act of simply being present was the first step toward healing. Yet, as their connection deepened, a shadow crept into Henrik's mind. He couldn't shake the feeling of inadequacy that gnawed at him. Would he be enough for Emil? Could he learn to be a father after all these years? The fear of failing loomed large, a specter that haunted his thoughts even as he engaged with his son. The laughter they shared was bittersweet. It was tinged with the realization that this was a beginning, yet it came with the weight of unanswered questions and unhealed wounds. When the meeting finally came to an end, Henrik felt both exhilarated and terrified. Emil's tentative smile was a balm for his aching heart, yet he couldn't ignore the shadows lurking at the edges of his joy. As they stood to leave, Henrik knelt down once more, looking into the boy's eyes. He promised that he would see him again, that this was just the beginning of something beautiful. Emil nodded, a hint of trust flickering in his gaze. On the way back to his gallery, Henrik's heart raced with a blend of hope and anxiety. He needed to talk to Ellen, to share the experience in the whirlwind of emotions that had consumed him. She had been his anchor throughout this tumultuous chapter, and he craved her reassurance, her understanding. Once back at the gallery, he found Ellen in her usual spot, surrounded by sketches and notes, her brow furrowed in concentration. The moment she looked up and met his eyes, he felt the weight of his emotions spill forth. He recounted every detail of his meeting with Emil, the boy's shyness, the moments of laughter, and the unspoken bond that had begun to form. But as he spoke, he couldn't help but reveal the fear that lay just beneath the surface. The fear that he might not be able to step into the role of a father the way Emil deserved. Ellen listened intently, her expression shifting from concern to understanding. She leaned forward, her eyes reflecting a depth of empathy that comforted him. She reminded him that love was the foundation of any relationship and that no one expected perfection. It was about showing up, being present, and forging a connection, one step at a time. Her words wrapped around him like a warm embrace, reminding him that he wasn't alone in this journey. However, just as hope began to take root within him, the tension that had been lurking in the background re-emerged. Ingrid's words echoed in his mind, a reminder of the stakes involved. He had barely begun to embrace this new chapter when the threat of losing it all began to loom like a storm cloud on the horizon. The realization that he might have to fight for his son reignited the turmoil within him. Henrik felt his heart race again, not with excitement, but with a sense of urgency. The joy he had felt moments before was now overshadowed by the stark reality of Ingrid's demands. The thought of losing Emil, of being cut off from the boy he had just begun to know, sent a chill through him. He couldn't allow that to happen. He needed to find a way to protect his newfound family, no matter the cost. The path ahead was fraught with challenges, but Henrik Lund was determined to navigate it, driven by a love that had finally awakened within him. The early morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Henrik Lund's studio, casting a warm golden hue across the expansive space. The air was thick with the scent of paint and turpentine, remnants of countless hours spent in the creative frenzy that had defined his life. Yet, today, the atmosphere was tense, charged with an electricity that mirrored the storm brewing in Henrik's heart. He stood at the center of the room, facing Ingrid, who had come with news that shattered the fragile equilibrium he had begun to establish after the revelation of his son, Emil. Ingrid's presence was imposing, her posture rigid and eyes aflame with a mixture of desperation and defiance. Henrik felt a wave of conflicting emotions wash over him as he gazed at her. This was the woman who had once been a significant part of his life, the mother of his child. Yet now she felt like a stranger, cloaked in shadows of resentment. He had thought their past was long buried, but here she was, dragging it back into the light, forcing him to confront not only her, but the life he had neglected for too long. With an unwavering resolve, Henrik stepped forward, his voice steady but laced with an undercurrent of anger. He demanded to know what she meant by her threats. The words hung in the air, heavy with implications. He was determined to stand his ground, to fight for the right to know his son, to be a part of Emil's life. He would not allow fear to dictate his actions any longer. The thought of losing the chance to be a father, to share moments of joy and love with his son, ignited a fierce fire within him. Ingrid's response was a mix of defiance and vulnerability. She had been a single mother, struggling against the odds, and in her eyes, Henrik saw the pain of years filled with unfulfilled promises and unanswered questions. But her desperation was not a justification for her threats. Standing there, he began to see her not just as the mother of his child, but as a woman caught in her own turmoil, fighting battles he could barely comprehend. Yet, he could not allow her to use their shared past as a weapon against him. As the confrontation escalated, the tension in the room became palpable. Henrik's heart raced, and he felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. Emil was innocent in all of this, a child who deserved love and stability, not the chaos that surrounded their lives. He had to protect him. The thought solidified his resolve. Henrik's voice rose as he spoke passionately about his desire to be a part of Emil's life, to give him the family he had never had the chance to be. Ingrid's demeanor shifted slightly, the fierce mask she wore beginning to crack under the pressure of Henrik's conviction. It was as if he could see her defenses crumbling, revealing the vulnerability that lay beneath. He realized then that her threats were not merely born of malice, but from a place of fear. Fear of losing control, fear of being abandoned once more. It was a powerful revelation that added complexity to their confrontation, transforming it from a battle into a poignant moment of shared humanity. Meanwhile, Ellen stood in the doorway, witnessing the heated exchange unfold. Her heart ached for Henrik, knowing how deeply he cared for Emil and how much he longed to be a father. She felt the weight of the moment heavy in the air, the stakes rising higher than ever. Ellen had seen the tenderness in Henrik's eyes when he spoke of his son, the flicker of hope that had ignited within him since their first meeting. Now, that hope was threatened, and the thought of it being taken away felt unbearable. With each passing moment, Ellen's admiration for Henrik grew. He was not just an artist, but a man willing to fight for what he believed in, for his son. She felt a surge of determination, wanting to support him in any way she could. Stepping forward, she made her presence known, her voice calm yet firm as she addressed both Henrik and Ingrid. Ellen expressed her belief that they could find a way to work together for Emil's sake, to create a solution that would benefit everyone involved. The tension in the room began to shift, the heat of confrontation giving way to a more collaborative energy. Ingrid, still on edge, listened as Ellen articulated a vision of co-parenting that focused on Emil's well-being. It was a concept that seemed foreign to her, but as she absorbed Ellen's words, a flicker of understanding began to penetrate her walls. Perhaps this wasn't just about Henrik reclaiming a role in Emil's life. It could be about building a family structure where Emil could thrive. As the conversation unfolded, it became clear that the battle for Emil's heart and mind was not just a legal issue but an emotional one as well. Ingrid's defenses slowly lowered as she began to share her struggles with being a single mother, the challenges she faced, and the loneliness that accompanied her journey. In that moment, Henrik saw the woman he had once loved, the one who had borne his child, stripped of her armor, revealing the raw, vulnerable human beneath. It was a turning point that shifted the dynamic among them, transforming a confrontation into a conversation. Ellen, sensing the shift, took a step back, allowing the two parents to connect on a level they had never reached before. She watched as they navigated the treacherous waters of their shared history, each of them slowly acknowledging their pain and fears. It was a delicate dance, one that required immense courage from both sides. Henrik, with every word spoken, felt a semblance of hope blossoming, a possibility that they could forge a path forward, not just for themselves, but for Emil. In the days that followed, a new sense of purpose enveloped Henrik and Ellen. They became united in their advocacy for Emil, working together to establish a plan that would not only allow Henrik visitation rights, but also create a supportive environment for Ingrid. The process was fraught with challenges, but they faced them head-on, determined to ensure that Emil would never have to choose between his parents. The day of the court ruling arrived, a moment that felt monumental in the lives of all involved. Henrik stood beside Ellen, their hands intertwined, both anxious and hopeful as they awaited the judge's decision. The courtroom was a stark reminder of the complexities of their situation, filled with legal jargon and formalities that felt overwhelming. Yet, in that moment, surrounded by the weight of their shared commitment, Henrik felt a surge of confidence. He understood that this was not just a battle for visitation. It was a fight for family, for healing, and for love. When the ruling was finally announced, it felt as though time had stopped. The judge's voice echoed in the chamber, and as the words sank in, relief washed over Henrik and Ellen. They had won the right for Henrik to be a part of Emil's life, to create those precious moments that would shape their bond. Ingrid, though given another chance to seek help, seemed to accept the ruling with a quiet resignation, perhaps realizing that this was the beginning of a new chapter for them all. As they left the courthouse, the weight of the past began to lift. Henrik felt a sense of clarity he hadn't experienced before. He looked at Ellen, her eyes shining with pride and support, and knew that together they would navigate the complexities of their new reality. With Emil by their side, they would forge a family, one built on love and understanding, leaving behind the shadows of their past. In that moment, hope blossomed anew, promising a future filled with laughter, connection, and the undeniable strength of love.